Hey everyone, welcome back to the Life and Language Podcast channel. I'm Ben.
And I'm Lily.
Lily, quick question before we start. Did you sleep okay last night? You look like you're running on pure coffee right now.
Ha! 2 cups already, and it's not even 9. Okay, but speaking of time, Ben, have you ever looked at a clock and thought, wait, why does it go this way? Like, why not the other direction?
I genuinely never thought about it until recently. And then I went down this rabbit hole online at midnight, which is probably why I also look tired today.
Right? It sounds like such a simple question, but the answer is actually kind of mind-blowing. So today we're talking about why clocks move clockwise, and there's real history behind it.
And before we get into all of that, we have our quiz question for today. Here it is. Before mechanical clocks existed, people told the time using sundials. So here's the question. In the northern hemisphere, which direction does the shadow on a sundial move across the dial? Is it A, moving left to right, B, moving right to left, or C, moving in a random circle depending on the season?
Ooh, okay. I'm going to guess A, left to right. That just feels right to me intuitively.
We'll come back to that later and find out if you're correct. But that question is actually the key to the whole story, which is why I love it.
So let's set the scene. We're talking about a time, pun intended, before anyone had a mechanical clock on their wall. People needed to track the hours of the day, and one of the most common tools for this was the sundial.
A sundial, for anyone who hasn't seen one, is basically a flat surface with markings on it, and a pointer called a gnomon. That's Gnomon, sticking up from the middle. As the sun moves across the sky, the gnomon casts a shadow, and that shadow moves around the dial and tells you roughly what time it is.
And gnomon just means the part of the sundial that casts the shadow. It comes from an old Greek word meaning one who knows, which is kind of poetic if you think about it.
So here's where it gets interesting. Most of the early civilizations that developed sundials, ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, were located in the northern hemisphere. And in the northern hemisphere, the sun doesn't pass directly overhead. It travels through the southern part of the sky.
Right. So if you're standing in Europe or North Africa watching the sun, it rises roughly in the east, arcs across the southern sky, and sets in the west. And that means the shadow cast by your gnomon sweeps in a very specific direction.
And that direction, in the northern hemisphere, is what we now call clockwise. The shadow moves from left, up through the top, and then around to the right. Left to right across the top. Sound familiar?
Oh, wow. So that's exactly what I guessed for the quiz. Moving left to right, or clockwise as we know it now.
We'll confirm officially in a bit, but let's keep going because this is where it gets genuinely fascinating. When medieval craftsmen in Europe started building the first mechanical clocks, this is roughly the 13th and 14th centuries, they designed the hands to mimic what people were already used to seeing.
They were essentially copying nature. The sundial was the reference point everyone had grown up with, so it made total sense to make your new invention behave the same way. That's what you might call a convention. A convention is an accepted way of doing something that a group of people agree on, even if it wasn't formally decided.
So clockwise movement became a convention because of geography and habit, not because someone sat down and made a logical rule.
We asked a few people what they thought when they first heard this explanation. Here's what they told us.
Honestly, I always assumed clockwise was just chosen randomly, like someone flipped a coin. Knowing it actually follows the sun is so satisfying.
I live in Australia, so when I learned that sundials in the southern hemisphere go the other way, I felt very seen. We really do live in a kind of mirror world down here.
This made me realize how much of what we accept as normal is actually just an accident of where history happened. It makes you question everything.
And that last one really is a big takeaway, isn't it? So much of what feels natural to us is just a reflection of where and when certain ideas developed.
Which actually brings us to something interesting. What about the southern hemisphere? If you put a sundial in Argentina or South Africa or Australia, the sun travels through the northern part of the sky instead, so the shadow moves in the opposite direction.
counterclockwise. And counterclockwise just means moving in the opposite direction to the way clock hands normally move. So going right to left across the top rather than left to right.
There's actually a fun thought experiment here. Some historians have suggested that if mechanical clocks had been invented first in the southern hemisphere, they might have been built to go counterclockwise, and that would be our normal today.
It's one of those things that makes you realize how contingent history is. Contingent means dependent on circumstances that could easily have been different. It wasn't inevitable that clocks go clockwise. It just happened that way.
There's also a separate thread here about water, specifically the old myth that water spirals down a drain clockwise in the northern hemisphere and counterclockwise in the south. That one is actually more complicated than people think.
Right. The Coriolis effect, which is the force caused by the Earth's rotation, does influence large systems like hurricanes and ocean currents. But for something as small as your bathroom drain, the shape of the basin and the direction you poured the water matter far more than which hemisphere you're in.
So that's a misconception. A misconception is a belief that seems reasonable, but turns out to be wrong. The drain myth is a misconception that a lot of people confidently repeat.
Okay, before we wrap up, let's quickly go through today's words so they really stick.
Gnomon, the pointer on a sundial that casts the shadow. Here's an example. The gnomon on the ancient sundial was worn down after centuries of weather.
Convention, an accepted way of doing things that a group has informally agreed on. For example, driving on the left side of the road is a convention in the UK, but it's not universal.
Counterclockwise, moving in the opposite direction to clock hands. Like the logo had an arrow pointing counterclockwise, which confused everyone used to the other direction.
Contingent, dependent on circumstances that might have been different. For example, the outcome of the experiment was contingent on the temperature of the room.
And misconception, a belief that seems true but isn't. Here's one. It's a common misconception that we only use 10% of our brains.
Okay, quiz answer time. Then, do you remember what I guessed?
You said A. The shadow on a sundial in the northern hemisphere moves left to right across the top of the dial.
And the answer is?
A is correct. The shadow sweeps left to right across the top, which is exactly the motion that became clockwise. You got it, Lily.
Yes! Okay, I'll take that win. And I think the big takeaway from today is that so many things we think of as natural or obvious are actually just accidents of history and geography. Clockwise feels right because of where the first clockmakers lived, not because there's anything inherently correct about it.
Such a good reminder that normal is really just what happened to win. If you enjoyed today's episode, comment practice and we'll reply with today's phrase.
See you next time!
Bye, everyone!